Hello, Weird Mythic Fam. I hope everybody's having a great Saturday. It is Saturday night. The sun is just now setting and it is beautiful outside. Oh, just loving this weather. You guys have no idea. And then supposedly it's supposed to rain or something. Whatever. But it has been a great day and a great like earlier this week I went to a concert with my sister, another show, guys, and then I have two more coming up. But I've never seen this person. His name was Tyler Childers, and it was a really fun show. We met some really good people. It was over in Berkeley. We met some just really fun people over at the bar that we went to. I cannot remember it for the life of me right now because I was drinking and it was a late night. But Berkeley is such a fun town. I've never really hung out there a whole lot, just kind of drove through. I go to San Francisco mainly, but it was a lot of fun. I encourage everybody to go listen to music, just live music in general, even if you don't know who the band is or you're not so sure about the music. I never heard of this guy before, and he definitely gained a fan, and it was just a lot of fun. So I hope everybody takes, those opportunities just to go see live music. Somebody's like, I got an extra ticket. You can afford it, help them out with the hotel and go with them. Hell yeah. So much fun. Well, this is going to be an interesting episode this week, guys. I am going to be talking about, of course, the most recent updates on the Lori Vallow trial. And then I'm going to be talking about some interesting children from the 12th century. So let's go ahead and just get into this Lori Vallow trial because, my God. So I haven't talked too much about it because of everything that's been coming up in the trial. So here's from my last 2 weeks from watching it. So the main thing that really stood out to me in the first week was Alex Alex's widow, Zuluma. That's Lori's brother is Alex, who also passed away. Alex actually passed away in December of 2019. But Zuluma went up on and did her testimony in the first, I think, 2 weeks, actually. Yeah, and here in my notes, she was up there for at least 2 weeks. She believes that Alex might have been involved with the murders of Tylee and JJ, mainly because of how Alex told Zuluma that he, quote, might be the fall guy for Lori and Chad Daybell. Now, Alex didn't go into detail with Zuluma about what he would be taking the fall for, but it was something that really stood out to her, and she was very much involved in this cult. I am going to call it a cult. I know they say that they're LDS or yeah, yeah, LDS. Wait, no, am I wrong? Am I wrong? No, I am right. They are LDS. Huh? Sorry, guys. Yes, they are part of LDS, but the people that I know that are part of that church do not try to cast out demons. But maybe they don't show me that. Who knows? Anyways, Zaluma was very much involved in this part of the cult, and she talked about how Lori was casting out demons and how Lori even confided in Zaluma that JJ wasn't going to live a long life. She never elaborated on that, and though Zaluma did ask what was going on. In week two, Zaluma liked to talk about how, well, didn't like to, but Zaluma was asked to talk about Alex's death, and that is Lori's brother. That she came home and saw him on the floor one day, and that's when she called the ambulance. She was the one who actually had to tell the doctors in the hospital to turn off the machines. And as she was talking about this, how she came home and saw her husband dead, she was so shocked and hurt. And I felt so bad for this woman just talking about that. And even though it says he died from whatever the natural causes was, I think it must have been something with his heart and blood pressure. I don't remember. He was also involved in the murder of Lori's ex-husband. So who knows what Lori and Chad had Alex do. Who knows all the pressure and the fucked up things that he was probably forced to do. So yeah, Zaluma definitely stood out to me during for the first 2 weeks. Somebody else who testified on the second week was Ryan, who is Lori's oldest son. And there's a recording that they played, and it was Ryan confronting his mom about his younger siblings. And in this recording, they heard it in the jury, and it's so bad. He was asking about his siblings, and Lori just kept mentioning stuff about Jesus knows, and everybody will understand once they are standing next to Jesus. And Ryan is like, what do you mean by that? I want to know where Tylee is. Where is JJ? And Lori just kept mentioning, Jesus knows, and everybody will understand later. And just hearing how heartbroken he is in that jailhouse recording is just, that I don't know, that whole family is probably so confused. Something else that really stood out to me in week 2 was what Detective Santis had said going over Tylee's phone records. He was constantly seeing Venmo transfers from her phone to Lori. So it looked like Tylee was sending money over to Lori. And some of those Venmo transfers did happen after Tylee went missing. Along with Detective Santis, there was a forensic accountant, and his last name is Douglas, who said that Tylee was getting Social Security benefits from her dad, who had passed away earlier. And so was JJ. So he testified that all those benefits were actually transferred from both of their accounts over to Lori after October of 2019, which was after Tylee went missing. So that's a huge thing for me. I was like, you can't be using her phone, sending out those transfers, like, so insane. There was also this time during the second week, I can't remember who was talking about this, but once both of the children were missing, there was this email that Lori had given to this realtor guy stating that her and her husband wanted to rent out this property or buy this piece of property in Hawaii. And they said that they really wanted a place that never had pets or children. And if that would help them get the property faster if they did not have pets or children. And that is so eerie to me. As soon as I actually heard that on the stand, like I remember hearing stuff in the media about it before all this, came on trial. And that was just so insane to actually know that that really happened. They were really looking for a place as soon as both kids were leaving. I can't. But another thing that happened during the third week, which really stood out to me, was also that Lori had sent an email to JJ's school saying that he wasn't going to attend there anymore and that he was going to go to Louisiana to live with his grandparents and pulled him out of school. This is the second time now that Lori has lied about where JJ was going to be. Because remember, she was going to have her friend lie about where JJ was, and she didn't do that. And now she's pretty much saying that the grandparents are going to have to lie about it too. It's just so strange. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into third week before I keep talking about like, oh my gosh, guys, all that shit finally came out. So one of the last testimonies that came out in the third week was from a Dr. Warren, and he talked about I'm going to get into the remains now, guys. So they were looking at all the remains, and they were so badly burned. They was so badly burned that they almost didn't have enough DNA in the charred remains to even tie it back to Tylee. And based on that, he conducted that it was a homicide by unspecified means because the remains were so well charred, or not so well charred. Oh, that sounds so bad. We're so badly burnt and scattered in this area that he's like, no, this doesn't just happen to somebody. It was definitely homicide, but it was by unspecific means. I never heard of that before, and they did have him explain it, thank God, which is the term that's used when that doctor Warren, when he was doing the autopsy, to be a homicide by unspecific means is that they were looking at not just everything they were seeing with these remains, but they were taking into account all the medical records, social records, what the pathologist found, what the toxologist found, and that's what brought him to his decision of homicide. But they don't know exactly how she died because she didn't die by being burned. That happened after she passed. There was another forensic biologist on the stand during the third week. Her name is Catherine Dace or Catherine Dace. She talked about how there was tools on the Daybell's property that had been used in the murder for Tylee. And that is where they got really, they have like DNA evidence that matches what they found in where the other charred remains were. But they were almost so badly burned that they almost didn't have enough actual DNA to tie both of those, the tools and the remains together. JJ was wrapped in plastic and duct tape. They found him almost mummified. The injuries that they found on JJ were mainly abrasions on his neck. And Dr. Warren, the guy who also did the autopsy for Tylee, described them as scratches that looked like he was trying to get the bag off of his head. And I just, it's so gut wrenching that he was more than likely suffocated like that. But on this bag, they did find fingerprints, and a forensic scientist, Tara Martinez, tested those against multiple people, like including Lori, including Chad, and all of them. But it actually came back to Alex's. Yeah, Lori's brother who passed away, his fingerprints were on the bag of JJ. Oh, fuckery, guys. Okay, so let's get this over with. So one of the other things that really stood out to me in the week 3 trial, Lori's sister testified. Now, her name is Summer. And Summer like stood up for Lori throughout a lot of this before the trial when everything was going down. Stood up, was right next to his sister, like, no, this can never have happened. But then the remains were found of Tylee and JJ on Chad's property. Summer, there's this recording, you guys, and it made me cry. I cried like because I'm an auntie and like I don't have kids, but I like kids. Like they're great. I'm an auntie. I love my nieces. I love my nephews so much. And this woman was talking to her sister and she was just like, quote, "We would have taken them. You know we would have taken them. You knew where they were and you did not tell us. You threw them away like garbage," unquote. Just to know that she now realizes that yes, they did murder these kids and then went away to Hawaii like nothing happened. You could hear it in her voice how heartbroken she is. And that's probably how the entire family really feels about Lori because nobody wants to believe that. And it's just so, heart-wrenching. So, all right, that 4th week is coming up. It wouldn't surprise me if it ends a little bit early. I'm surprised it's actually gone on this long. It's actually gone a little bit faster than what they thought. And it's so hard. This is why I don't do true crime stuff, guys. Oh my goodness. So, guys, let's get into the story today. Get away from the real true crime stuff and let's get into some real stuff that happened that's real creepy, but not like murder. So check this out. Let's go back to the year 1150. We are going to be talking about the Green Children of Woolpit. Now, this place called Woolpit is in Suffolk, England. Shout out to the last episode of the Rendlesham Forest incident, which was also in Suffolk. But Woolpit is a Old English word, and it translates to wolf pit. And it's actually spelled Wulfpytt, so wolf pit. It was known to, like, that's where they would go and hunt and trap wolves in Suffolk, England. So one day in 1150, really no specific date, there was a group of villagers that saw 2 young children emerging from the forest in Woolpit. Some of the villagers went up to these children. There was a girl and a boy, and they seemed to be siblings. They looked very confused and were talking in what everybody would describe as gibberish. But the strangest thing about these children was that their skin was green. And I mean green, like there was no mistaking it. It was green. Once these children were found, they were then taken to the home of Sir Rriigghhtt I. I could be mispronouncing his last name. It's Calne, but Sir Richard. Sir Richard let the children sleep at his home, and he offered them food. However, the children did not want to eat the food. They also seemed to not be interested in anything that he happened to put in front of them. After a few days at staying at Sir Richard's, these green children were in the garden and happened to see fava beans. And the children immediately started eating them right off the vine. Yeah. So the children continued to live with Sir Richard for, I'm guessing, a few months or a year, since there's no real timeline on how long it took them to pretty much learn English and all that good stuff. But anyway, so the children were living with Sir Richard, and it's been a few months, and the children eventually did start to eat like other things besides fava beans, green beans. Like they were just eating them raw. So eventually Sir Richard was able to get them to eat other things. And once the children started to eat other things besides those green beans, their skin did to happen to actually turn to like a white pinkish compared to the green that they had in the beginning. So their skin did eventually change. Sir Richard was also able to teach them English, and once the children were more fluent in English, they were finally able to tell Sir Richard and anybody else at this point where they had come from. Now, according to the little girl, who seemed to be the oldest, her response to like, where did you come from? Her response was, quote, "We are inhabitants of the land of St. Martin, who is regarded with peculiar veneration in the country which gave us birth," unquote. Yeah, that was a lot for me to take in. So they mentioned that their homeland was the land of St. Martin and it was always green. And also that, quote, "the sun does not rise upon our countrymen. Our land is little cheered by its beams. We are contented with the twilight, which among you precedes the sunrise or follows the sunset. Moreover, a certain luminous country is seen, not far different from ours, and divided from it a very considerable river." So, considering they just learned English and this is how they talk, is very interesting. I don't know much about Old English. I'm sure that's kind of how they talked, but this seems very poetic to me. So, from what I got out of that was that the land of St. Martin was always lush and green, and it always seemed to be twilight, like the sun would, like pretty much right now. It is 7:44 p.m. and it is beautiful outside. Like it is great. But there it looks like that there was also a big river and a possible other like landmass on the other side of that giant river. Really pretty the way she explained it. The children were also able to read or to tell the story of how they got to Woolpit. Now, although this story doesn't quite make sense, it is their story. And even they admitted that it doesn't really make sense how they got to Woolpit from the land of St. Martin. So this is their story. The children were out tending their flock. We don't know of any other detail besides flock, so I'm going to assume they at least know what a flock of birds are. But they were out tending their flock when they heard a big sound. They mentioned that the sound resembled the church bells at St. Edmund's, which was actually really close to Woolpit. And when they heard those sounds, like once they were in Woolpit, they're like, oh, those are kind of like the noises that we heard following the sound that we heard when we were out tending the flock. As they were following the sound, they were just in Woolpit all of a sudden, just out of nowhere. So that's kind of like the short story. Like they heard these bells, they followed the bells, they're in Woolpit. But I had to do a little bit of digging and be like, okay, but where did they, like, what did they get into? Like, you don't just follow these noises and just wander. This is what really happened, guys. There was another version of the story that the children were hearing these bells from a cave. And as the children, were hearing these bells in the cave, they got really curious, as any child would do. Where are these bells coming from? So they went into the cave, continued to walk through the cave, never found the bells. But as they continued to walk through the cave, they ended up in Woolpit. They walked through this cave into Woolpit. And I think the quotes that I could find were like super like creepy, I felt like, just because it was Old English, like just following these bells in this cave, and then they happen to be there. Now that the children are fluent in English, Sir Richard now decided to take them to be baptized because that's what everyone does. So they went and got baptized. Unfortunately, it wasn't just a few days after the baptism that the little boy died. And that's it. Died very young, right after the baptism. Now, the little girl, however, lived, started going by the name of Agnes, and continued to live with Sir Richard and work around his home. Agnes did end up marrying the Archdeacon of Ely. His name was Richard Barre, Barre. I found a few articles stating that they did have one child together. Agnes did not have the best reputation growing up. Apparently, she was super rude and people just didn't really like her for whatever reason. Probably because she's from a different, you know, um, I'll get into my theories later, but just a different world, you guys. Come on. So, what is this story? Two school-aged children with green skin talking in an unknown language were randomly found. They then learn English, get baptized, and one passes away after the baptism, and the other continues to live a somewhat normal life, but always continued her story of coming from the land of St. Martin. Her story never changed, and people always knew Agnes as one of the Green Children. Now, yes, this story happened in 1150, but you can go to Woolpit today, and there is a memorable like thing dedicated to the Green Children of Woolpit. It's this big iron like circle. It looks really cool. I'll have to post it. But yeah, I mean, the Green Children of Woolpit, they just happen to stumble upon not speaking the right language of the native land. And then when they're able to relay their story, they're from somewhere completely different. It's freaking wild. So, okay, let's finally get into these theories, guys. Talk about the green tint to their skin, since it did actually go away. This was supposedly caused by malnourishment, called green sickness, which is when the red blood cells have less red pigment and it'll make your skin pale. Now, I never read anywhere that it turns you green, which is also called chlorosis, which is more of like a pale blue color, not green. So the green tint thing could have been malnourishment. Okay, whatever. Another theory about the green skin is arsenic poisoning. Sadly, this was practiced among many parents back in those times, that if a parent was unable to care for their child and didn't want to like abandon them, they would actually just decide to poison their child for them to die, and then they wouldn't have to take care of them. So this theory is that parents gave both of the children arsenic, then left them in the forest to die, and they didn't die, and then they became malnourished and forgot their language. But damn, that's dark. One of my favorites, and probably the one I mostly believe about the Green Children, are from another dimension or a parallel universe, and they just stumbled into the world. And that is honestly probably one of my favorites, and one that I kind of leaning towards. Another fun theory is that they came from underground. Yeah, dude, underground world where these children just happen to walk out. They happen to walk through that cave into the upper world. I mean, how many other theories or how many other like conspiracy theories are out there of people living underground? I mean, there's like a whole reptilian race supposedly living underneath us. Who's not to say that they were reptilians? They had green skin. You never fucking know, man. Maybe they were aliens. Maybe they were aliens and they had to stay here on Earth for whatever reason. And here's another theory that I didn't really come across, but as soon as I started reading about the cave and the bells, the only thing that came to my head, man, was fairies. That they were fairies and they came from the Fae world and actually did just stumble upon humans. And I mean, how could I not think that with bells and caves? But I'm definitely leaning towards the whole different dimension, and they just happened to step into some sort of wrinkle and just came into our world. Now, this next theory I'm going to tell you about is a bit more believable, but I do not buy into it. However, I will talk about it because it is trying to be a little bit more logical about where these children could have come from. This theory is about the Battle of Fornham, which happened in 1173. Now, remember, the children in Woolpit were found in 1150. So the Battle of Fornham did happen near a place called Bury St. Edmunds, which is where the children heard the bells when they were in Woolpit. So there's a connection. And this location is about only 20 miles from Suffolk and only a 4-day walk from Belgium. Why would I mention Belgium? And I know a 4-day walk, but they didn't have cars back then or anything. So anyways, Belgium. Why do I mention Belgium? Because that's another unknown language. So there's this other different dialect from the Dutch language called Flemish. And in the 12th century, there was a lot of Flemish people, like they weren't allowed to practice being Flemish anymore. Like you couldn't have that sort of dialect. There's a lot of people getting pushed out, a lot of people going into battle so that they didn't speak that language and probably have that whatever lifestyle it was. Didn't do too much history on that. Sorry, guys. So anyways, this theory is that these children are actually Flemish. They got caught up in the Battle of Fornham, then spent time in the Woolpit forest before becoming found. And, the whole malnourishment thing, because they were lost in the forest for years. Now, as I said, I don't believe this theory, and it's mainly because 10 years in the forest seems really far-fetched. It's be over 10 years. That battle happened in 1173, and the children weren't found till 1150. So that's the only reason, like, it's good, but I don't believe it just because that doesn't seem like the right timeline to me. Now, how did we get like this whole story of the Green Children of Woolpit, since it was from the 12th century, right? Well, this was written down by two different people. One guy by the name of William of Newburgh, and the second guy is Ralph Cogshell. Both of them lived in England and I think near Suffolk, or one of them, who was it? Ralph Cogshell was the head of the abbey in a monastery about 30 miles from Woolpit. So both of them lived near Woolpit during this whole thing. Even though they weren't first-hand witnesses, they were pretty much second-hand witnesses of people being like, there's these green children in the next town over. So I don't know if they are aliens. I really like the idea of maybe they could be like reptilian race, which I'm still learning a lot about the whole reptilian theories. But if we're going to stick with aliens, they're probably some type of reptilian. But I really do think the Green Children of Woolpit were from a different universe or some sort of parallel universe. And I just love how this story has kept going, and they actually have this little memorial plaque for them in Woolpit to this day. I really hope you guys like that story. Check it out. Send me your theories. What do you think about the Green Children of Woolpit? Go to all of my social media, Weird Mythic Podcast on Twitter, Weird Mythic Podcast on Instagram, which also has my link tree to all of the website and merch store. Don't forget to go to YouTube, which is Weird Mythic Podcast. And please send me any encounters you have with cryptids, UFOs, fairies. What do you think about this story of the Green Children of Woolpit? Do you think that they're fairies, reptilians, came from another universe? Send that to weirdmythicpodcast@gmail.com. See ya.